Rubio, Zelenskyy, and Orbán, a diplomatic circus in Bavaria. Hello, dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to WNT. As the host of this chaotic geopolitical theater called the Munich Security Conference 2026, I welcome you to my analysis of the speeches of three stars: U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, or rather his reactions, because Orbán kept his speech to himself. Maybe because in Munich, he preferred listening to Zelenskyy grilling him. The conference, held from February 13th to 15th, 2026, in the heart of Bavaria, can be summed up as a mix of soothing words, desperate calls for help, and mutual hair-pulling. In 2026, with the world still wrestling with the war in Ukraine, climate disasters, and Trump's New World Order, irony is the only way to digest it all without antacids. So pour yourself a coffee, sit back, and let's get into it. Let's start with Marco Rubio, who arrived in Munich like Trump's diplomatic angel of death, or rather, the guy sent to calm Europe down after last year's performance by Vice President J.D. Vance, who basically called Europeans weak. Rubio, with his Cuban roots and Republican charm, described America as the child of Europe. Oh, how touching. As if he were saying, "We're family, but now you're going to listen to Daddy Trump." His speech was packed with conditions. The U.S. wants to rebuild the alliance, but only if Europe stops bowing to the climate cult that hurts competitiveness and starts spending more on defense instead of social programs. In other words, Europe, stop saving the planet and buy more tanks, because nothing screams Western civilization like rearmament at the expense of the environment. Take a look at this photo of Rubio at the podium. He looks like a used car salesman offering you a new Western century in exchange for your sovereignty. Rubio also talked about shared Christian faith and ancestors. Sounds like an invitation to a family barbecue, but it's really a warning. Mass migration is destroying our civilization, and borders are the fundamental act of national sovereignty. Oh yes, because nothing strengthens transatlantic bonds like blaming migrants for cultural erasure. He mentioned Ukraine only once to stress that the U.S. is leading negotiations with Russia. No mention of democracy, no promise of endless support. Instead, the line, "We're prepared to go alone, but we'd rather go with you." Thanks, Marco, for that generosity. Europe now feels like the poor relative invited to dinner just to wash the dishes. Now let's move to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who arrived in Munich like a wartime hero in a black suit. No green military sweatshirt this time. His speech was a long catalog of horrors. 1,451 days of war, 6,000 drones, and 150 missiles in January alone. And not a single undamaged power plant left in Ukraine. Zelenskyy thanked everyone, Germany, Norway, the Netherlands, the US, for air defense systems like Patriots that save lives. But how many times can you say thank you for weapons that arrive late, while Russia upgrades Iranian drones with AI and Starlink? He criticized the West's approach. Instead of preventing escalation, we own the clocks, a quote from Bob Woodward, and that only prolongs the war. And then the highlight. Zelenskyy went after Viktor Orbán. He said Orbán might be thinking about how to expand his belly instead of building an army that could protect Europe from Russian tanks rolling into Budapest. And when receiving the Ewald von Kleist Award, he sarcastically thanked Orbán for pushing all of us in Europe to be better, to never be like him, someone who has forgotten the word shame. Boom! That's like tossing a grenade into Hungarian goulash. Zelenskyy called for security guarantees before any peace deal, NATO membership for Ukraine, and EU membership with a fixed date. Putin, he said, is a slave to war. He can't live without it, doesn't walk the streets, doesn't live like normal people. Volodymyr, you're an actor, but this script is very dramatic. Europe listens and then goes back to arguing over budgets. Here's a photo of Zelenskyy at the podium with the Ukrainian flag behind him. He looks like an action movie hero begging for a sequel with a better ending. And Viktor Orbán? Well, he didn't deliver a big speech in Munich, maybe because Zelenskyy would have interrupted him. Instead, he reacted after the conference on social media and in the press. After Zelenskyy's attacks, Orbán said the debate isn't about him or Zelenskyy, but about the future of Hungary, Ukraine, and Europe. That's exactly why you cannot join the European Union, he said about Ukraine. He accused Zelenskyy of interfering in Hungarian elections, claiming Zelenskyy is directly attacking the Hungarian government and questioning the sovereign decision of the Hungarian people. He referenced last year's Hungarian referendum where people said no to Ukraine joining the EU and promised to push that position again and again. Shortly after Munich, Rubio visited Budapest and publicly backed Orbán. President Trump is deeply committed to your success because your success is our success. They signed nuclear cooperation deals and talked about a golden age of US-Hungarian relations. Rubio strokes Europe gently in Munich, then flies to Budapest to hug Orbán, known for his ties to Putin and for blocking aid to Ukraine. It's like he's saying, Europe, we belong together, but Orbán is our special buddy. A diplomatic love triangle, with Zelenskyy playing the role of the abandoned lover. Look at this photo of Rubio and Orbán shaking hands. They look like two businessmen who just closed a deal to sell their souls. Comparing the three, Rubio represents Trump's new Western century, full of borders, weapons, and criticism of green policy. It's like an American remake of European history, with the US dictating the script. Zelenskyy is the desperate voice from the front line, grateful for charity, but demanding real guarantees, and he can't resist stabbing Orbán, the EU's permanent thorn in the side. Orbán, he's the master of passive aggression. He doesn't react directly in Munich, but afterward, he finds allies in Trump's administration to strengthen his position ahead of elections. The conference felt like a family dinner. Uncle Rubio lectures everyone about discipline. Cousin Zelenskyy begs for food, and Uncle Orbán quietly steals from the pantry. What does this mean for Europe? Rubio canceled a Ukraine meeting right before the conference, signaling the US is losing interest in long-term support. Europe now spends more on Ukraine than America, and Zelenskyy's 30 thank yous sounded like a receipt for that. Rubio's support for Orbán shows that Trump's administration is dividing Europe, backing outliers like Hungary and Slovakia, while the rest are told to change or lose support. Europe, welcome to the era of two speeds. Some ride with Trump, others with Putin, and Ukraine is stuck in traffic. To illustrate the entire circus, here's a collage of leaders. It looks like a family photo where nobody is genuinely smiling. Conclusion. In closing, dear listeners, the Munich Security Conference wasn't about security. It was about the survival of alliances in the age of populism. Rubio offered an olive branch with thorns. Zelenskyy fought with words. Orbán fought with silence. And the world keeps spinning. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. If this political comedy entertained you or annoyed you, both count. Drop a like, subscribe, hit the bell, and don't miss the next episode, where we'll dissect more big speeches. Take care, keep your distance with a bit of irony, and ideally with popcorn. See you next time. Bye.